Hello, yeah, Grant Davey. I'm not talking about a braided river, but the estuary of one, the Rakahuri estuary. We look after the braided river birds which nest higher up this river, but it turns out they're actually very dependent on the estuary as well. All of those species get food out of the estuary. Some of them nest around the edge. On the left, there's the results of 5 or 10 minutes of Googling Ashley Estuary. It turns out the place has actually got some international reputation, and that is partly because although it's a very small area, there are not vast numbers of birds, but we actually have more species here than a lot of other similar places. Not that there are a lot of other similar places. So just a few photos to set the scene. These are some of the braided river birds we look after up the river in the estuary. There's some more. The wrybill is really interesting. They gather in large numbers at the estuary before the nesting season, before they move up the rivers to nest. Can be up to 100 there at a time. We only get up to about 15 pairs up our river, and I really wonder how many of the wrybill coming from the North Island to nest in Canterbury rivers pass through the Ashley estuary. These are some of the birds which, other than braided river birds, which nest around in and around the estuary. And these are Arctic migrants. Top left is bar-tailed godwits, I think, coming in directly from Alaska. Bottom, about ready to go back to Alaska. There's a couple of males in breeding plumage there. There's some of the other birds around there. So none of these photos are taken from hours of sitting in hides or anything like that. They're just simply a matter of walking around with a camera and taking a photo when you see it. So this is another thing which makes this place so special. Not only are there a lot of species there, but they're very, very easy to see, very easy to get close to, and that is part of the problem. And we realise that birds are not the only important thing about the estuary. It's a very important Mahinga Kai area. That's a local called Ivan Rupani there. He's showing some kids from the Tuhiwi school how to collect shellfish, and he gave them a talk on his family history in the area, which is not inconsiderable. And we've been talking to people from the Tuhiwi marae, and we seem to be on the same page about trying to work to improve things at the estuary. It's really quite astonishing. I was standing there and these birds were fishing same time as these people were fishing. They were about there. I don't know why I didn't get them both in the same photo, but here we have people and birds happily coexisting. And the estuary is a big white baiting place. There's probably insects and fish and all the rest of it, which we don't know about, which are very important there, but we're bird people. So the only thing that the River Care Group has done down there over the years, well, since 2018, is trapping all around the margins of it. It does seem that our catch rate is declining over time, and that may be partly because of our trapping. We've done nothing to monitor the results of this trapping, whether we're actually having any success. So we decided to do something about that, and we got the chance of some funding from the Waimakariri Zone Committee, and we put it to a scholarship for a student to look at this area. But we basically had to begin the study so she didn't miss out on an important part of the 2022-2023 nesting season. So what I'm showing you here is basically preliminary work, and she will do a lot more and quantify it a lot more. But we're pretty horrified by what we saw in the first couple of months of work. So it was not a good idea to just wait until this thesis is finished. We want to do something about what's happening there now. So that's the study area. Drone photography in, I think, start of September or something, 2022, which will have to be done again. And all the aims of her thesis, which is exactly what is required. So she's a real quality student with a quality supervisor. So we should end up with a very good piece of work. So that the red line here shows the area of the Waimakariri District Council Northern Pegasus bylaw. So inside the red line, there's all sorts of restrictions, but unfortunately, they are just routinely flouted. Environment Canterbury Rangers, there's one of them over there. They do a really excellent professional job of talking to these people, trying to head things off, and at some danger to themselves going out in the river and stopping the real bad offenders. But they don't have a lot of teeth to what they do. And what they do, yeah, it's of some danger to themselves, and that can't be there enough to really do a lot of use. So I split this area up into 5 sort of sub areas and wrote down what I thought should be nesting there. Areas A and B, the same species with a banded dotterel, the white-fronted tern, variable oyster catcher. And I've split them up because it seems like this area here between these two mouths of the river should be an excellent place without much disturbance, probably without land predators. And we had records from, there's a paper done on work in 1993, 33 banded dotterels nesting along here in 1993. And in the mid-90s, when the layout of the estuary was the same with 2 mouths, there was, I understand, banded dotterel nesting all the way along here. Over here, I've seen black-billed gull, pied-stilt, banded dotterel, black-fronted tern, white-fronted tern in the past, and lots of black-backed gulls over here, but I don't see why banded dotterels and pied-stilt wouldn't nest there. So I'm going to go through each of these areas. This is that area A up to the north where I thought things should be absolutely wonderful, but the blue dots are black-backed gull nests from the first couple of months of monitoring. When Eleanor took over, well, I'd found 130 nests throughout the estuary. Eleanor found a total of 250, so this is perhaps half of the nests which were in this part of the habitat. The pink triangles are observations generally of single banded dotterel. Not only were there no nests along here, they hardly went there. I didn't see any north of here. The green are observations of variable oyster catchers, and there were some nests in there, and they seem to be fairly successful. Down the bottom there was a failed white-front tern colony, which I'll get onto. Just illustration of what was going on there. Lots of black-backed gull nests all over the place, some variable oyster catchers which were capable of nesting in amongst them. That tern colony was developing very nicely. There was about 1,000 birds there, and they most definitely had started nesting. You can't see nests, because all they do is lay an egg on the sand. I put a trail camera there and sighted it fairly badly, and it got bumped and knocked sideways. But if you look closely, those are eyes of black-backed gulls in among where these birds were nesting. Come back to pick up the trail camera, no terns there, just black-backed gull tracks and broken white-fronted tern eggs. And the white-fronted terns didn't attempt to nest in the estuary again. Well, there's 2 or 3 individual ones which nested elsewhere, but we lost sort of 1,000, I don't know how many, 500 nests, more than that, through black-backed gulls. So we're an absolute infestation there. There's been black-backed gulls nesting there for years, but last year they were spread all around the place. 250 nests adds up to more than 500 birds. They were the 3rd most abundant bird species in the estuary. And I'm a geologist, not an ecologist, but it seems to me that you shouldn't have that sort of ratio. There's about 1,000 white-fronted terns at one stage, up to 800 black-billed gulls and 500 or 600 black-backed gulls. It doesn't work. This other area here, The green is where I reckon should be nesting habitat of banded dotterel, but the pink triangles show there hardly any seen there. The other thing is, normally you'd see, in the past I've seen godwits roosting along there at high tide, but I actually didn't see any of that. So, some of there were some observations of variable oyster catchers. So in 1993, 33 banded dotterel nests along there. 2022, 23, from what I could see, there was no prospect of any nests of any species at all there, and there were no banded dotterel nests. Despite these pretty good signs, there's vehicles going right through here, but vehicles are allowed, they have access to the mouth of the river during whitebaiting season. But they're not allowed to be driving around here, but they do. And dogs are not allowed in the estuary, but they're there all the time. So that's the welcoming rival can get when they come through the Ashley Estuary. That's the worst I've seen, but it's just routine. You go there in the weekend, nice weather, there's dogs, people everywhere, all through the sand dunes, all along the edge of the river, and almost always quite respectable looking people who walk past the signs and seem to think that those signs don't apply to them. And I thought it was absolutely astonishing that this pair of sort of mixed oyster catchers had a nest there and raised a chick, fledged a chick, but nothing else did. This is Area D, where the river, Area D and Area C, where the river enters the estuary to the west. The pink symbols show that there was a lot of banded dotterels around. The purple, lots of pied stilt. The orange, quite a few black-fronted tern over in this area. So that the banded dotterel forced out of one of the places they used to nest along the sand dunes, etc., over to here. Lots of signs, routinely ignored. This is a nesting situation. At one stage, it was something like 800 black-billed gulls gathering around here, and they started to nest, but they seemed to get disturbed out. They started up here, and there was a couple of hundred there, and at least 25 sitting on nests, and then they just disappeared. No eggs left. I think perhaps the black-backed gulls had a influence on that one, but they did manage, the third attempt, to have a successful colony here. Orange is banded black-fronted tern nests. They nest here every year, it seems, in an area which is extremely disturbed, and they never seem to have much success at all. They might have one or two fledglings out of it. Banded dotterel were mainly over here, and there's only about 10 nests we found, and they actually did quite well. I think all of the nests hatched eggs, but we didn't spend enough time to really work out the fledgling situation. So this is what you're getting happening in that area. This is the first attempts at the black-billed gull colony. This vehicle roared through there quite fast, I'm told, because I was talking to whitebaiter who saw it, turned around, roared back, went and whitebaited somewhere else, and then went away. He wasn't a local. They haven't seen this person before. Same thing a couple of days earlier in the night, straight through this attempted colony. What I didn't get, for some reason, my camera didn't pick up the occasion when somebody was throwing a ball into the gull colony for his dog to retrieve. The first time I was told that, I thought, oh, he's got to be kidding, but someone else told me the same story. This is a successful black-billed gull colony. It actually had a high fledgling success, which Eleanor recorded. This is what was happening there. This fella had lost his Rottweiler. And he just ran. So I don't know why he thought his Rottweiler might be out there. This is when the gulls were fledgling. I think he was a bit annoyed that they were coming up from around his feet and buzzing around his head. But just absolutely no consideration, no understanding of what he was doing. This is where the banded dotterels nest in the middle of the night. First thing in the morning, a quite respectable looking lady walking her dog off the leash that was where the banded dotterel had been sitting. And that was the first attempted gull colony. He went within about 10 metres of the birds with cheery waves right past the signs. So that was the worst of where the black-fronted terns were attempting to nest. You can see beaten tracks, which are mainly whitebaiters, and you can see hern tracks, probably mainly at night. So along the river, we can deal with this sort of thing. With ECAN, we, for quite a few years, I think, have blocked off most accesses to the river. And along with publicity, every time we see a bit of a horror story, it goes in the newspapers and people learn about it. And education is probably the biggest success the group has had, because the last couple of years, there hasn't been major problems out there. But down at the estuary with whitebaiter access, it is a whole lot more difficult. This is the last of those areas, sub-areas. This is where I'm used to seeing black-backed gulls nesting, but there was more again this season. Again, other species weren't going near them. There was a Canada goose nesting here. I'm pretty sure around here somewhere there was a variable oyster catcher, but the other birds basically weren't coming close. The conclusions and recommendations. This blue line is a buffer around the black-backed gull nests, within which banded dotterel hardly go, and anything else better bloody watch out. This was observations just walking down here once, but didn't see any banded dotterel past this point here. And where the banded dotterel have been pushed over to is very heavily disturbed. So we've got people here who've been working for years to allow banded dotterel to nest on the beaches at Kaikoura, and we just sort of lost them. And I don't know if anybody really noticed. I'm sure they'll come back if their situation gets improved, but it's really not particularly flash. So the first thing that needs to be done is to properly inform the public of the situation and try and promote change. So we want to have a public meeting at Waikuku Beach and maybe get another group set up to try and take some responsibility for what's going on down there. We need measures against the black-backed gull, and we're having a meeting with DOC, ECAN, District Council in 2 weeks, and I'm sure something will be worked out. They're looking at tightening up the bylaw there, and it could perhaps be more enforcement, but it's really education and teaching people that what they're doing is wrong with the disturbance issues. Second last slide. And last slide, this was Opihi Mouth, January last year, with a large black-billed gull colony right next to a large black-fronted tern colony, and serious mayhem all around. There were no signs up telling people not to do this, but they really should know better, I think.